Michael, welcome to Locked In. I think you saw a clip of me on Hopeaholics. Was that how we found each other?
I was listening to Johnny Mitchell, the Connect podcast. And once I found him, I started to kind of go into this genre of podcast. And I immediately found you. And I also loved your podcast because there were so many episodes, right? And I was just like, I just started listening to it. And then one day, I don't know if it was I saw you on Hoboken, I was like, I'm just going to DM Ian and just see if there's a connect, especially because you're not that far from me, right? I was like, oh, it could be an easy trip. And I did, and you got right back to me, and that was that,
Yeah, I run my socials and check my DMs regularly. I've gotten some of my best episodes just looking at the DMs.
Totally.
And other people could have got those episodes too. They just had to look in the DMs. So I never passed down an opportunity. And I saw that we had a lot of my friends from high school are following you that are into fitness and stuff. And you have some incredible brands. One which you brought with us here today too. If you want to explain the audience what these are.
Yeah, so Creatures of Habit, and we'll get into that story because this brand is really just sort of an extension of my life story of overcoming some pretty significant adversity. But basically, Creatures of Habit is a wellness brand rooted in nutritional healthy habits. We launched with that product called Meal One. And it's a high protein overnight oatmeal, super clean ingredients. It's made with chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, pink Himalayan salt for electrolytes. It's made in 30 seconds and it's a full complete meal to get you started on your day. So a lot of people struggle with nutrition. I feel like, especially now with the wellness sort of world and industry starting to really, really take shape and becoming a little bit more mass market, the word wellness is no longer like this highbrow premium thing. Everybody wants to understand and or be in the world of wellness because people just want to be healthier in general. And so I just, when I was thinking about my next move after the restaurant industry, which I spent most of my life in, I was like, I've got to figure out a way to introduce something that's pandemic proof. Because the world of restaurants in real life business, brick and mortar is not, and we'll get into my story. But when I got sober at 23, I had a couple of guys come into my life who really introduced me to the world of fitness and nutrition. And they told me to eat oatmeal every morning as part of my journey, right? They were like, you need to start putting positivity into your body. And starting your day with a big bowl of oatmeal that you can add anything to, it's super accessible. Financially and everything is a great way to get your day started nutritionally. And so over the years in my journey of coming from this super dark, very scary place to living a life way beyond anything I could have ever imagined, nutrition plays such a big role in that, man. What we put into our body really does dictate how we feel and perform. And I knew when the pandemic hit and I had to step away from, or I made a decision to step away from the world of restaurants, I said, I have to do something that's aligned with my passion for wellness. And there's nothing that I've done more than eat oatmeal every morning. I mean, I've been eating oatmeal every morning for the last 20 years. I'm 44 years old, arguably in the best shape of my life, but I've been in this kind of shape for the last 15 years.
Wow, you're 44?
Yeah, dude.
You look damn good for 44.
I'm 44, man.
That's incredible, man.
Yeah, and I owe it to my commitment to nutrition. So and I do honestly believe, well, I know for sure anybody that's scrolling on Instagram and they see these beautiful bodies and all these ripped, jacked males and females, 95% of that is in your success in being able to commit to your nutrition. You can work out as hard as The Rock, but not have a nutrition protocol or not have a nutrition plan and not see the results. Nutrition is one of the hardest things to help people with. And so, me sort of being able to help people along their journey, giving them an easy habit to start their day with, it's been awesome.
Do you do one of those packets yourself every morning?
Every day.
Okay.
Every day. And sometimes I'll do 2 a day, especially when I travel, because it's a 350 calorie meal. It's a full meal for 350 calories. So it's not a lot of calories, but it's super satiating and you're getting 30 grams of protein. So when I'm traveling, nutrition for me is really important, man. I'm always down to have a meal where I indulge. Like I don't refrain from eating burgers and pizza and ice cream, but 80% of the time I'm dialed. And if I commit to that, which I do, I'm traveling and I travel a fair amount. It's hard to make those decisions, right? Like when you just have no other options, sometimes you're just like, oh, I'm just going to grab whatever I got. So I always have those with me because I can make them in a pinch, and it's just super easy, and they fill me up.
It's interesting what you said about pandemic proof, because that was kind of my mindset too, because I wanted to get back in the nightclub industry when I got out of prison. And then the pandemic hit a year later. And, what I do now is kind of like that event business, but digital. And in a way, podcasting is pandemic proof, because a lot of this blew up because of, COVID and the pandemic, like other people's podcasts.
It's 100% pandemic proof podcast, right? Like I think human beings in general, since the beginning of time, have craved story, right? It's part of our human condition. It's part of our makeup. I believe human beings love listening to stories, and there's only a handful of people that are really good at telling stories. So if you're a storyteller, and you'll know because other people will tell you, and typically people will want to kind of circle you in a lot of areas in your life, kind of dictates you're a good storyteller. That is what podcasting is, and that cannot get replaced, and it's not going anywhere, and I think similarly in a business like Creatures of Habit, where people got to eat. You know what I'm saying? We all got to eat. So if I can create this environment where people rely on our brand to deliver healthy, really delicious, simple, inexpensive nutritional habits, we've got something special. I
love it. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Manhattan.
Manhattan, okay.
So I grew up on 87th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue. I was born in 1980, so I experienced New York City kind of in that really interesting time where, I was a baby in the 80s, but I remember the end of the 80s and the 90s is really sort of when I grew up. New York City was like the epicenter, and potentially still is, but then there was so much going on in cultural kind of shifts, right? And I was right in the heart of it. It was a pretty incredible time.
What did your parents do for work?
So my dad was an electrician, but he was very sick, super sick. He had juvenile diabetes, also known as type 1 diabetes, but he just didn't take care of himself. So he was on permanent disability after 1990, and my mother was a secretary. So my mom worked in the dentist's office.
Did they stay together throughout your childhood?
They did, and it was really, really difficult. We lived in a small, tight-quartered apartment. I shared a bedroom with my sister, and my father was incredibly abusive and violent and angry. And a lot of it was because of his experience in life. His father was a military guy, really, really, really tough on him. But I think because my father was sick, he just took it out on everybody, specifically me. I bear the brunt of the majority of his aggression. It sucked.
Why do you think that was?
I think I was a male, right? It was my mother and my sister. I think I fought back. Like I wasn't, when I was a young kid, there wasn't a lot of fighting back. But I think my father didn't really have the ability to express love in a way that you and I would understand or want to receive, right? Somebody bought me a psychic reading a couple years ago for Christmas, and I'd never done a psychic reading before, but I was like, all right, fuck it. Can I curse on this?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. And so I get on the phone and I call this woman, and I had no idea what to expect, but she was like, hey, we can do it a few different ways. You can ask me questions, or I can just start channeling. And I was like, I mean, I don't know what to ask you, so why don't you just start channeling? And so she immediately brought up my father, like immediately. And she said, you know, your father loves you and always has loved you, but he has a block. Like she's like, I could see a block between his head and his heart. They didn't connect. He didn't know how to express what was going on in his heart to his brain to be able to communicate that to you. And that was like, boom, super emotional for me, right? Like, cause most of my life, I just didn't think my father, he died a long time ago. But I would, in a lot of work that I've done on myself over the years, specifically like deep breath work in the last couple of years, I found out that a lot of the decisions that I made in my life and make in my life, both good and bad, were in an effort to get my father to tell me he loved me. And, it didn't happen. So, living in that environment was really, really challenging as a kid. Like I rebelled hard and got into just an ungodly amount of trouble as a kid and a teenager and early 20s.
Did you have friends that had, maybe normal families where they had like the entire loving home and you kind of envied that at all?
Oh, like that was so how I figured out that I had this ability to connect with humans, which is arguably I would say, not only my passion, but my superpower is the ability to sit down with anybody, anywhere, and connect. You put me in prison or you put me at the White House, like I am going to make friends. I just have that ability and I'm confident in it. Like it's part of how I've built my entrepreneurial career. It's like that emotional intelligence that people talk about. And so when I was a young kid, I hated being at home because it wasn't safe. There was nothing safe about it. It was uncomfortable, dysfunctional, and scary. And so I would ask to sleep over at my friends' houses all the time. That was my first form of escapism. That was my first like Houdini style life. And so I would go to my friends' houses and, apartments. And I remember in first grade, I had a friend, this kid, Ross Delafield, who I'm actually still friends with today. And I remember being there and they let me stay over for dinner and they all sat around a dinner table and had dinner together. I had never done that. My family had never sat around a dinner table to have dinner together. And they were so nice to each other. And like, it was like this comforting, warm thing. And I remember very clearly saying to myself, I have to make Ross's parents like me so they'll allow me to sleep over. Like I have to sleep over here and like make it like a regular thing. And so I did that. Like I remember very, very strategically at that young age, figuring out ways to make them like me. And that became an MO for me over the years. I've got to make them like me to get what I want. And so, yeah, I definitely did. I was a regular at all of my friends' houses all the time.
How did your friends describe you as a kid back then?
In those early days?
Yeah.
Nice, kind, got along with everybody. Not a bad kid in elementary school, like kind, good kid. And athletic, like I dove into sport too at a young age. So that was sort of another area of escape for me. But yeah, I think generally in elementary school days, I was a good kid,
Did you go to public school your whole, elementary, middle school, high school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went to public school and I ended up going to LaGuardia High School for the performing arts. So that was like the fame school. I got in there for the most ridiculous instrument on the planet. But in my junior high school, there was band and I was the smallest kid in my class. And the teacher thought it would be really funny to put a tuba on my lap. And they gave me the tuba. And I was like, fuck it, I'm playing the tuba. And I played the tuba and got like really good at it. And then got into LaGuardia High School for tuba. And, high school is a blur for me. Once I turned really 12 years old was like the beginning of a journey into into a not so great place for me.
Were you actually passionate about instruments or?
No.
Okay.
But I just was there and, I was good at taking direction.
So what happened at 12 that kind of set a different path for you?
Well, I mean, at that point, it was very violent at the household for me. 12 years old is really kind of when the violence really started to escalate, because I was now fighting back. Like if my father would get in my face and shove me, I would shove him back. And those shoves escalated to fistfights eventually. And it was so painful for me. I mean, it was really, really tough. And I was in the social worker was my like co-pilot, and, I was in therapy. And one day it got so bad at home that I was like trying to figure out a way to show my father how deeply painful the relationship between he and I was. And so we had gotten to a big fight. I called him into my bedroom. I had a knife in my hand and I just slit both of my wrists in front of him. And I was thinking in my mind, this is going to get him to like tell me he loved me, or like give me a hug and like be like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is what it's come to. And he beat the shit out of me. And obviously I didn't cut myself deep enough to, but when I went to school the next day, the social worker saw, I had to go see the social worker pretty much every day. And she saw that I had bandages on my wrists, and she asked me what had happened, and I told her the story. And so they mandated that I go to Painwinnie Mental Institution to get evaluated. And that's when the child services got involved in my family household. And at that point, I was kind of like ready. Like I didn't want to die, but I wanted to find another way to live. And I'd already been smoking cigarettes at that point. Somebody had given me weed that summer between, I think 7th and 8th grade or something like that. 7th and 8th or 8th and 9th grade. And I smoked weed and I was like, boom, that's it. This is it. This is where I'm going to live for a while. And that weed ultimately ended up very quickly, turning into psychedelics and, crystal meth and cocaine. And, it just got really ugly. And it got really ugly at the house too, because I was now high and my father would get in my face and I would just straight punch him, and the police were showing up all the time. And finally at 15, child services had, we had gotten to a big blowout. Cops showed up. Child services also showed up and told my mother that they were going to put me in foster care if she didn't take me out of there. And I heard that. My mother also reinforced it, and she said, this is what they're going to do. And I was like, well, are you going to stay, or are you going to take me out of here? Because if you take me out of here, we're golden. If you stay, I'm out, and you might not see me again, because there's no chance I'm going into foster care. And my mother was afraid for her life too, for my father. My mom was diagnosed with something called abused wife syndrome, where my father was very abusive towards her as well, verbally, physically. Not like, I never saw my father actually strike my mother, but he would shake her and throw her, and and so my mom was very, very scared as well, but he would threaten her life pretty regularly. And like one of the earliest memories I have as a young kid was sneaking into the kitchen. My parents, so in our apartment, it was a 1-bedroom apartment with a little dining room alcove, and the dining room was connected to the kitchen. My parents had a Murphy bed that would come off the wall, and they would turn that room into their bedroom at night, and then during the day they would lift up the Murphy bed and it would be like a little dining room. And in order to get into the kitchen though, at night when the bed was down, the only way to get in there was to go underneath the bed. So as a little kid, I would like wake up, in the middle of the night. I had like an orange juice addiction. So I would go under the bed and I'd go into the kitchen to like grab my orange juice or apple juice. And I remember one night doing that. I couldn't have been more than 5 years old. And I like walked in and I saw my father and my mother in the kitchen, and my father had a knife to my mother's throat. Devastating memory. So my mom was really afflicted by that, of course. And so she couldn't leave. She was terrified, right? So I did. I left. And at that point, I had already been on the, out and about, and I was already selling drugs. I was using an enormous amount of drugs, and I was already with the wrong crew. And just, trouble was like everywhere. And so it just got worse and worse, once I left the house.
Why do you think you turned to drugs ultimately? Did you have like a group of friends that were trying it, or did you watch something that kind of, put the two together that, I'm feeling bad, I need to try drugs, or what was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a combination of the two, because drugs were so easy to get. It's a lot easier to get drugs than alcohol as a kid, right? You got to buy alcohol at the liquor store. You buy drugs from the drug dealer, right? Like the drug dealer.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, the drug dealer doesn't really check your ID, And so it was a lot easier to get drugs. There were kids that, I definitely was hanging out with that were using drugs. I typically also was a lot younger than the people I was hanging out with. At 12 years old, I got a job in a restaurant for the first time. And so I was definitely the youngest person. And it was just like, I was exposed to a lot, Also working in the nightlife in New York City from 12 on, basically. I mean, there was drugs and alcohol everywhere, right? So I think I gravitated towards it because I saw these other people doing it. And I also, the first time I did it, I felt free. So like drugs really worked for me for a long time. Like I mean, if you were to take a snapshot, or if you had like a camera following me around, you wouldn't say that they're working for you, kid. They'd be like, that doesn't look so good. But in my mind, because of like the stuff at home, I certainly felt a sense of freedom and a sense of security in my drug use,
What drug did you tend to cling to the most out of all the ones you were mentioning?
After all was said and done, there was probably about 3 to 4 years where it was a lot of party drugs. But at about 16, 17, it became cocaine, and then ultimately smoking cocaine. And then at the end of my drug days, heroin, because I was the coke or the crack or whatever I was doing wasn't working anymore, and I was essentially in psychosis and paranoid all the time. And the only way to really come down from that was pills or heroin. And this is before really Oxycontin kind of came into the mix. I got sober in 2004, so I've been sober 20 years now. But it was I ended up overdosing on heroin, and that was the first real. That was like when I OD'd and came very, very close to death, but basically died. I got sober 2 weeks later, but that 2-week period of time, I had consciously made a decision to die. Like that was like, I'd overdosed. I'd left that apartment in the East Village of Manhattan. I was walking west on 13th Street after just basically dying. And the girl that I was with, terrified to call the ambulance. So she helped me get into a bathtub, put me on my back, and just turned the cold water on and let the shower hit me for like 30 minutes, cold shower. And that's what saved my life, honestly. And when I left that apartment like 3 hours later, I swore to God that I would never use drugs again. I was like, this is it. How could you possibly have let it get this bad? Everybody's been telling you you're dying. You know you're dying, yet you still continue to do this. Like, how is this possible? I wanted to be sober so bad, but I just didn't know it was possible. I didn't know how. And I swore that afternoon that I wasn't going to use again. And then 3 hours later, I was using again. And when that happened, I was like, okay, this is how you're going to die. Let's make it as quick as possible, because you don't have anything to really live for. You've burned almost all your bridges. You hate yourself more than anything on the planet. And you should just end it this way. You came so close, you might as well just continue down the path. But that didn't happen. I'm sitting here across from you, you know? So, yeah. So, I mean, you know, cocaine and you know, eventually crack and, yeah. And then eventually heroin to come down from that.
Why do you think so many individuals get to that point that you were just describing of, okay, I'm done, this is my breaking point, only to use again, you know, hours, days, months later and have that relapse? Because I see that all the time on the show.
It's a disease. It's a disease. You know, I just had a really interesting guest on my podcast, this guy, Dr. Russell Sarasky, who is a double board certified neurologist and addiction specialist. And he has spent his career sort of distilling this idea that addiction is very similar to diabetes or cancer or high blood pressure or heart disease or, you know, similar disease, right? Like, people say, you know, I'm an addict, but it should be reframed to I have addiction. I have addiction, even though I'm sober a long time. I have the disease of addiction, and my brain simply cannot use drugs or drink alcohol. And if I do, I will, like, it fires off these dopamine receptors that are different than potentially yours. Because I don't know your story well enough to know if you're an addict or not, but I would assume you're not. And my brain fires off these dopamine receptors way more severely, like to the tune of like 10x of what your brain would do if you ingested alcohol or drugs. And so it's actually a disease. And unfortunately, the you know, mass population doesn't see it that way because they know that people can get sober or can stop using. It's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult. And the success rate of people getting sober is low. And unfortunately now with fentanyl, the death rate is incredibly high, like catastrophically high, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of people a year. I think we record like something like 100,000 fentanyl overdoses in 2024, something like that. But that's, like, in my opinion, a fraction, because there's so many people out there that are just dying, that are not getting, you know, that they're just not throwing into this number. You know, fentanyl is it's a grain of sand of fentanyl, and it's in everything. It's in Adderall pills, ecstasy pills, Oxycontin, Percocet, all of it. It's in everything. It's in cocaine, it's in heroin, it's in, you know, ketamine, it's in marijuana. It's everywhere. It's insane. And kids are dying around the clock from it, you know. So addiction is something, the part of my mission in life is to share my story like I'm doing now, with the hopes that one person hears it and questions their belief that that there's not a solution for their problem. I know there's a solution. I'm sitting here, former crack addict, heroin addict, 20 years later, got sober young, 23, and in my journey of sobriety have put together shit that no one would have ever in a billion years. You take the most famous betting men on the planet and you put them in a room. You take a picture of me on August 1st of 2004 and a picture of me now. You put those two people together and say, would you bet that guy becomes this guy in 20 years? Not a single one of them would place that bet because of what I was like and what I looked like then, you know? So I guess if you're listening to this podcast, you know, this is my little plug to say, it doesn't matter how far gone you are. It doesn't matter how bad you think it is. It doesn't matter how unique you think you are and all the problems that you have. There is a solution to get sober and live a way better life. Like just a way, way better life. I didn't think it was possible, but it is, you know.
So do you think some people are born with addiction, others aren't, and the ones that are born with it, it just takes something to trigger it, and it may or may not be triggered in their lifetime?
I believe 100% that it is there are certain people that are predisposed to this genetically, right? So like they know that there are sequences that will point to being prone to or more susceptible to addictive behavior. Not everybody that is born that way necessarily, you know, gives in to the addiction, but I believe certainly I was born with it. And because I know how I am, take the drugs and the alcohol away, I know how I am with everything else I do in my life, with business, with family, and, you know, I'm married, I've got 2 kids. I love my family more than anything on the planet. Like the household that my kids are growing up in is literally a complete 180 of where I grew up. And that's because I put so much energy into it. Like with business, it's a similar thing. Like I'm an animal. With fitness, savage. My nutrition, fully committed, you know? And I believe I was the same way with drugs and alcohol. You know, like you look at a drug addict and you know, a lot of people will go, oh my God, what a waste of space. What they don't realize is that person has an unbelievable ability to commit and be loyal and be responsible to what they want. You take away the drugs and the alcohol from that person still has this inherent ability to commit, be responsible, to get what they want, and be loyal. That's why there's so many successful former addicts in the world, right? Like a lot of athletes, you know, a lot of these ultra marathoners, a lot of people in business, a lot of people in Hollywood. Their careers skyrocket once they get sober because they're like, oh my God, I can channel this energy that I used to put into this, game over, you know?
Were you hesitant to raise your kids in the city because of your childhood? Because you live in the city now.
No, I wasn't actually. I was like really kind of looking forward to it because I believe the city gave me my grit, you know? I mean, I know it did. I know it gave me this sort of entrepreneurial hustle that I have. And so I wanted to, like, I kind of like felt raising kids there under the kind of household that I wanted to provide for them would be awesome because they, you know, I also should say that I was terrified to have kids. I was terrified. I met my wife 8 months after I got sober, and she's my soulmate. We've been together 20 years. We were together for 10 years before we had kids. And there's a bunch of reasons as to why, but honestly, I was terrified to have kids because I knew that I didn't have the anger. Since I got sober, a lot of my anger kind of dissipated and my aggression dissipated. Towards the end of my drinking days, I was very aggressive and violent. And once I got sober, like it kind of just vanished because I also picked up Muay Thai kickboxing. But I never like, you know, I knew that I didn't have what my father had in terms of that just inexplainable anger. However, I was still scared to have kids because there was like this part of me that thought like, well, maybe if I have kids, like I'm just going to follow suit. And maybe I don't have the ability to break the chain from my grandfather to my father to me. So I was really scared, but thank God, knock on wood, there's been none of that. Like, I'm happy to say like, I'm an awesome dad and I'm proud as shit of that, you know? But yeah, you know, the raising kids in New York City was something that I was like really excited about. And then the pandemic hit. And, you know, we decided that taking the kids out of the city to our house, we had a weekend house, was like, let's give it a shot. I never thought that I would live in the country. Just like, I just never thought it was going to be something for me. I just didn't think I didn't think I would, you know, city guy. But then we did, and I fucking love it there. Like you would have to pay me a lot of dough to move back to New York City, and my kids love it there. My wife loves it there. We've got space, and you know, so yeah, you know, I think knowing what I know now about living in, you know, upstate, I would choose it over the city all day.
Going back to your high school years working in nightlife, were you still taking school seriously at all, or was that, you know, kind of on the back burner?
You know, I mean, I found my senior report card not long ago, and I had 172 class cuts my senior year of high school. So I guess to answer that question, no is the answer. But the one thing, again, that I have is this ability to connect with people and the gift of gab. And I had all of my teachers kind of like on speed dial. You know, like I all my teachers liked me, even though I was a fucking fuck up, falling asleep in class, coming to school on no sleep, not going to class, you know, showing up late. Like somehow, some way I was able to like, I guess I would call it like manipulate my teachers to give me a pass. And so I went to summer school every summer. It's kind of crazy that I still went to school and I didn't live with my parents, you know, but I finished high school. I didn't drop out of high school. And, yeah, I mean, that is, I'm so happy that I did that, you know, cause I don't even think I was consciously thinking about it. As a matter of fact, I sold a lot of drugs at high school. So like that was motivation alone for me to be there, but all my friends went there. So like, you know, we would check in for school and then we would dip. We'd spend most of the day in the Meadow in Central Park because we went to high school just down the street from that, you know.
Were you thinking of the future at all? Did you have plans, or were you just so consumed by your addiction you couldn't even think of that?
No thought of the future in those days. You know, I mean, I was, you know, I had thought that at one time, you know, I thought I'd be an actor. Like that was it. I was like, all right, I'm going to be an actor. You know, everybody told me I should be an actor, you know? And so I was like, all right, I'll be an actor. Fuck it. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And I went to the school for performing arts. So I used to like hang out with the drama students but yeah, no, not at all. You know, I lived basically life a day at a time.
When you were hustling drugs, did you know what the word entrepreneur meant at
Definitely
the time?
not. No. But I learned, I would say, all of my entrepreneurial skill set in that world.
Yeah, there's a clear translation, you know, from a drug dealer to someone that owns a business later on in life.
100%.
It's almost like a prerequisite.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot. I mean, you know, I bet, well, maybe not, but there's definitely, for me, a direct connection to how I learned how to move in business from that. And I started really young, you know. I started selling drugs at 14. So I spent, after I got sober, I still sold drugs. And my wife, my now wife, came into my life about 8 months in. It was the one thing I couldn't shake. I couldn't figure out how to shake the drug dealing part of my life. And at that point, I never touched product ever. I had my Connect and my Custies handling business, and that was that. Like, I didn't touch a thing, and I wasn't making as much money as I was when I was in more involved, but I was cool with that because literally there was no smoking gun ever. And so it was so hard for me to shake because I was making a fair amount of cash without doing anything. And I'd set it up that way. And I really only got my game tight like that after I got sober. Like after I got sober, I was like, I put it together so that I was never ever going to be caught with the bag. And my wife she was my girl at the time. She knew that I had done that, but she didn't know that I was active. And then one day she was at my apartment and she found a big old duffel bag of product. And it was like the one time that I had something sitting in my house. And she was like, it's me or this. And that was when I had to make the decision, to stop. But there's a lot of dudes that I know that come in to sobriety or come into the world of recovery that do that's the hardest thing to shake if you're involved in that world,
What do you think are some like traits or characteristics of drug dealing that translated into your business entrepreneurial mindset now?
It's like the greatest form of marketing in general is word of mouth, right? And you can't really market in the world of drug dealing outside of word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was making an experience like, I'm not a big scary guy, right? And for me, I'm like kind of like this like disarming kind of character. I developed a really, really great network of people, both on the plug and the custody side, because of how I conducted as me as a human, the emotional intelligence piece. And so, I basically just parlayed that. And, when I was 19 years old, I was living in the East Village on 9th Street between Avenue B and C. And I had a delivery service with one of my roommates. There was 2 roommates. One of my roommates and I had a delivery service. And the other roommate knew that we had a delivery service and he wanted to get down, but it was he wasn't the right guy for it, and we made that clear. But I had a delivery service and I was in my apartment and it was very, the rules of the house were like, no one comes here, right? Unless you got a girl, like gravy. But aside from that, no one comes to the apartment. Unless it's like a friend that we all know. Anyway, I walk into the apartment one day, I see the other roommate with like 4 dudes in the living room of our apartment. And they were unsavory characters, dudes that like, I would never invite into my apartment, period, ever. I walk in, they're smoking blunts, talking all this shit. And I'm like, oh, damn. And the house is like, there's 2 safes bolted to the ground. The fridge is filled with shit. Like it's just, at any moment could get real ugly fast. And I like go into my bedroom and I can hear the conversation from my bedroom in the living room. And this dude is like, I do this, I got this, da, 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 da. And I'm like, what is this guy thinking? Anyway, they leave. I approach him and I'm like, yo, homie, like, what are you doing? Are you out of your mind? Like, you just blew the whole spot. You don't know these guys. He's like, oh no, I went to high school with this dude. I'm like, I don't give a fuck where, nobody knows him. Nobody knows him. And he's here with 3 of his friends that look like they're ready to pull a burner out and just like rob the place. What are you doing? Anyway, nothing happened. A month later, I'm in the apartment with a friend of mine who everybody knew. And he wasn't like up on the serve and the things that we were doing necessarily. He was just a friend of mine that he was friends with everybody in the apartment. So anyway, we're sitting there and the buzzer rings and I had this runner, his name was Adam. And I answered the buzzer and I was, who's, and he goes, it's Adam, let Adam up. Adam comes up and opens the door and it's not Adam. And it's 3 dudes with guns out and they put a gun in my face, whip me with it, take me into the bathroom with my friend Khan, pistol whip us, duct tape us, throw us in the bathtub. And they're like, we got set up essentially. It's a Friday afternoon at like 4:00 though. So in my mind, I'm like, these dudes aren't gonna murk us, but this is obviously a fucking scary situation. And if I had a gun right now, I'm not pulling it out to shoot these dudes. That was that was like a first realization for me. Like, this game is above my pay grade. Like, I'm not ready to do what potentially is necessary to protect the business if it comes down to push to shove, right? So these dudes robbed me. They got me for like 40 grand in cash and like 10 pounds of weed, something like that. And, you know, I knew that I had gotten set up, and you know, but like, it's just interesting. It's interesting because when shit goes down in that world, it's very different than when shit goes down in my entrepreneurial life. You know what I'm saying? Like, but it's not dissimilar in the sense that things get really bad really fast in both worlds. Like, things can get really, really scary really fast in the world of entrepreneurship, and you have to figure out how to navigate, right? Like, what I've learned from that world, the dark side, is, you know, if you get back up, you'll be fine. You know, like, you unless somebody wants to kill you. But if you get back up, you could rebuild quick. In the world of entrepreneurship, if you get back up, that is what is going to dictate the difference between you and 95% of the rest of the entrepreneurs that quit when it gets really scary.
You have to keep pushing forward.
It's endurance. It's endurance and resilience, right? For me, those are the two words that I commit to. Resilience, I am always going to get back up, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how scary it is. Like, I'm the guy that will never, ever quit. I'm just not going to quit. And then resilience for me is basically not only just getting back up, but learning from what happened and applying systems so that, not saying it's never going to happen again, but that we stave away from those things happening again. And I believe that is what resilience is. It's not just about getting back into the ring. It's getting back into the ring after watching the tape, you know? And the tape is so important in the world of entrepreneurship, in business in general. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a gut guy. I really do sort of believe that every time I go against my gut, every time I make a decision that I'm like, oh man, I don't know. Like, it looks really good on paper. The interview went really well, but there's something. If I say, fuck it, I'm just going to make the decision, 9 out of 10 times it blows up.
Yeah, I've been getting the gut feelings after I've already made the decision, though, which sucks. Like, you think about it after, you're like, that was a bad deal. I shouldn't have done that. Or like, that's just I don't know. I used to have a better gut decision like before I did something, but I was also in way different high pressured scenarios, like with the concert business and nightclubs and stuff. But now I'll like make a decision because you're not necessarily under pressure. And then you realize, because you have some time to think about it, it wasn't the best. So I'm working on taking longer to make a decision. I think that'll click, you know? I
think the age-old saying, right? Like, and it can apply not only to hiring people, but like hire slow, fire fast, right? Like, take your time with making decisions in general is kind of like my motto. But once you feel that once you feel like things are not going well, it's got to be fast. Because the longer you stick it out, the more of a chance you give, even though your gut is like, this is not the right person, or this is not the right path, the longer you're going to suffer. You know, I've like figured out how to make quick decisions when things aren't going the right way. And I think a lot of people try to hold on to their initial gut instinct. And sometimes your gut's off. You know, you just got to make a decision to change direction. And that's okay. Like, I think also a lot of entrepreneurs, specifically younger entrepreneurs, feel like changing your mind is a bad thing. Changing your mind is a great thing, right? Like, feeling like you need to change your mind and not doing it is a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, in entrepreneurship, you're constantly making decisions, changes. I've done so many changes to the studio in just like a year from moving in here. You're always changing things, you know?
Yep.
And you never know what it could lead to or who you can meet.
Yeah, and there's no, and like, you know, you write a business plan, right? a business plan to raise money for a new company, typically investors want to kind of see like, what is this company going to look like in 5 years? So you do your absolute best to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, in year 1 and year 2 and year 3 and year 4 and year 5, and this is what it's going to look like, and this is what your return is going to be, and it's beautiful. I mean, it never pans out like that. nowhere close to that, and but I do believe in a business plan and a deck. I think that's important stuff to like actually do the exercise of what it could be. But just know, from my experience, I've founded 3 companies. I've exited 2 successfully. I'm building my 3rd now. If I, telling you what is happening now compared to what I initially had proposed to my investors, very, very different story. Totally different story,
Yeah, I learned that the hard way in life. I used to overpromise, underdeliver. Yeah. Now you got to, underpromise, overdeliver.
I try my best not to do that,
Why do you think you didn't walk away from the drug game after that setup?
Because I was deep in the throes, like I was deep in the throes of it, and the money was still good, I think that part of it is just like it's just part of that world, especially in that time, like so many people in New York City that were selling drugs in the 90s and early 2000s. If you didn't get robbed, it was weird. Like if you didn't have a gun put to your head and stuck up, it was weird. Everybody was not only doing it, but getting it done too as well. Like people were constantly getting robbed. And I definitely got away with I got away lucky, for sure. I mean, the fact that I didn't go to prison, it's crazy. I mean, when in the 90s, let's see, let me think. Late 90s, early 2000s, one of my connects, I mean, this is crazy to even say, but he moved everything out of an apartment on 20th Street between either 1st and 2nd Ave or 2nd and 3rd Ave. Right across the street from his apartment, right across the street was the precinct. Literally. He was moving thousands and thousands of pills of ecstasy, hundreds of pounds of weed, mushroom, like just an enormous amount of movement in that apartment. And it was directly across the street from the police precinct. I would walk out of there with a backpack filled with ecstasy.
Got adrenaline rush.
Oh my God, crazy. I don't even know how I did it. I don't know how I did it. It was insane. Really.
When you were at the peak of your addiction, how was your relationship with your family, your sister, your mom?
It was pretty bad. My sister and I had a really, really rough relationship growing up, and honestly, only up until about 5 years ago did we really develop like a very, very tight bond. My sister and I are super close now, and I'm so grateful for that. But, we shared a bedroom, my sister and I, until I moved out. Now, granted, I rarely slept there after 12 years old, but like sharing a bedroom with your older sister is tough, man. We were on top of each other, literally, and we were close in age. We're 15 months apart. But she's older. So like her friends and my friends were kind of convoluted a bit. She didn't want my friends to be her friends. And, we just had a lot of drama, my sister and I. My mother has always been a loving mom, even though there's a lot of shit there, My mom has always loved me, and I've always loved her. She didn't get the easiest hand, So my mom had been supportive of me in my teenage years, trying to help me get sober, because by the time I was 15, 16, I was a full-fledged addict, and everybody knew it, I wasn't hiding it, but after a certain point, my mom kind of gave up trying to like help me get sober because I was just a loose cannon, you know, like it was just not, there was nothing she could do because I was completely off the rails. And, but like I would call her, you know, but it wasn't like we had like the greatest relationship because I was I was out of my mind, you know, and then I got sober and I changed very quickly, you know, like when I still pinch myself today, you know, the fact that I've been sober for as long as I have, but, my relationship with my family now is great. You know, my mom and I still struggle a bit, but my sister and I are like, you know, she's the best. Yeah.
When you were in full-blown addiction mode, what was a day like for you?
Well, I would stay up for 2 to 3 days at a time, most of the time. So I worked in nightclubs and restaurants. And so for me, typically, if I did sleep, it would be waking up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And typically going to work, restaurant or a nightclub, and drinking immediately. And then, you know, using drugs. And like that was my life. You know, it wasn't, you know, there was a crew that I rolled with in the city, and we were not, you know, we were bad news. And when I wasn't working, it was a lot of partying, you know, drug dealing, a lot of fighting, and constantly trying to scam, constantly trying to figure out how to scam in any way, in big ways and little ways, you know. I think my life was basically, and somehow, some way, I always kept a legit job. Like I always worked in a restaurant. And I think for me, that was the one thing tethering me to life, to like reality, was that I had a job in either, and towards the end it was a restaurant. Like I really do think that was what was tethering me to life. It was like what kept me there, because all the other friends that I was with, that I rolled with, did not have a legit job. Everybody was straight drug dealers. And I always kept a legit job, but it was also for me a way to like build my Rolodex. You know, I wasn't ever selling drugs out of the restaurant, but I definitely acquired customers there, you know.
Was college in the cards for you?
I did a year at Hunter College and slept through it and realized that this was a waste of time for me. There was no way I was going to, you know, get through college at that age. I eventually ended up going to culinary school once I got sober.
Oh, you went to culinary school?
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
FCI.
Oh, where's that?
It's in the city.
Okay.
It's down in, so there's CIA, right, which is like a 4-year program. The French Culinary Institute is down in Soho, and it's a 2-year program for the most part. Yeah.
Do you feel like you needed that to help you with your restaurants that you would later open?
Well, so I worked at this restaurant, Frank, in the East Village for years. So I got hired there when I was 20, and I was definitely not sober. And I worked there until I was 28. And, you know, I was the crazy bartender that like, this restaurant that I worked at was like a super hot spot. There was always, I mean, it was a small little joint, but there was always filled with like models and actors, and, you know, it was like one of those spots. And I loved working there because I could be high all the time. I could drink, I could be high all the time. Nobody was up my ass ever. Until finally, you know, my boss fired me. But if it wasn't for my boss firing me from there when I was 23, basically the story of how I got sober, I had been up for 2 days with a couple of dudes that I, you know, and they had called it quits. This is August 1st, 2004. They had called it quits. They were like, all right, man, we're done. We're going home. We were on my roof in the East Village. And in my head, I was like, I'm not done. I still have a ton of shit to take care of, meaning drugs and alcohol. So they left. I went down to my apartment and I caught a glimpse of myself when I walked into my bedroom. There's always a wall mirror right there, like a behind the door mirror. Closed the door, caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and I had been up for days, right? So like I looked like a zombie, and that was kind of how I looked towards the end anyway. Just like gray in the face, puffy, hands swollen to double the size they are now. Just terrible. And I caught a glimpse and I like looked at myself and I was like, wow, like you really are the biggest piece of shit on the planet. Like you don't deserve, this is the end of that 2-week period of time that I had sort of committed to just like killing myself through drugs and alcohol. And I really kind of like made eye contact with myself in the mirror. And I think that might've been the first time ever I've done that. I do that a lot now in a much different way. But then I like looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, you should just jump out the window. Like you should just end it, dude. Like it's not happening as fast as you want it to happen now. The way you're doing it, you should just jump. You're on the 5th floor. It'll be fast, and then you'll get the love from the people that you want the love from because they'll be sad that you're dead. Just do it. And I continued to use drugs that, right after that, like crazy conversation I remember having with myself. And then I blacked out. And I came to 16 hours later and I had slept through work. I was supposed to go to work that day. And Frank, I called Frank. I was like, I'm so sorry, man. He was like, Mikey, that's it. He's like, it's too much. You're dying. Everybody knows you're dying. And I love you, but I can't watch you do this, especially on my dime. Like, you're fired. There's nothing I can do for you. You have to fucking get sober. You have to change your shit because, like I don't want to have to call anybody to tell them that you're dead. And I kind of looked at Frank as like, kind of like this fatherly-ish kind of figure, even though we partied hard together. Like I just kind of thought of him as that. Like any opportunity I got to feel like somebody was like a fatherly figure that would show me love, like I would like gravitate towards because I wanted that, And I begged him for my job, dude. I begged him. I was like, please give me another chance. And so eventually he was like, look, I'm not going to give you a job working in the restaurant, but you can come here at 8:00 in the morning and clean with the porters if you want. If you get sober, you can show up every day at 8 a.m. Call me when you get here. If I find out that you've taken a sip of alcohol or a single speck of drugs, you're done. You got to get sober. And that was it. I never drank or used drugs again from that day. I like called somebody I knew from this nightclub that I worked at, this woman, Karen, who was like an older sister to me, took me in when I was down and out in my teenage years. And I knew that she was sober. And so I called her. She called her boyfriend, who was also sober, and told him to come and meet me. And he did. And for the first time in my life, I thought that I was like I thought my life was over. I was like, sober, I'm going to be like, living in a library for the rest of my life. Like I had no idea what the hell to expect. But I saw this dude who was covered in tattoos, tough guy. And he wanted to hear my story, and he would like listen to me for 4 hours, just like blabber. I probably lied about everything. Like everything that came out of my mouth, I'm sure was a lie at that time. But he literally just listened to me talk for 4 hours. And then he said, I can help you. It's up to you if you want to take the bait, but I can help you. I know exactly where you're at. And that guy, he he was a Muay Thai kickboxing competitor. I didn't even know what the fuck Muay Thai was at that point. But he was basically like, I'm going to write a plan for you. This is going to be what you do on a day-to-day basis. And he's like, you don't have to do any of this. But if you do it the way I tell you to do it, your chances of getting sober and living a happier life are great. And the chance of you living a life beyond anything you've ever imagined are possible if you stick to this thing. And that plan was simple. He basically said, wake up as early as you can in the morning. As soon as you get up, turn around and make your bed. As soon as you're done making your bed, drop down on your knees and pray. Ask God for help. I don't care if you believe in God or not. You need help and you don't know how to ask for it. So the best way to start is on your knees in the morning in a humble way. And then right after you're done with that, do some push-ups and then go into the bathroom, take a piss, brush your teeth, wash your face, and immediately get on a pair of sneakers and go out for a walk. Hopefully that walk will turn into a run at some point. But I want you to move your body first thing in the morning. As soon as you get back from that walk or run, have a bowl of oatmeal. You can add anything you want to it, fruit, berries, nuts, protein, whatever you want to it. Just have a big bowl of oatmeal to get you satiated so you're not obsessing about food and you're eating something healthy. And then go to this sober community meeting. Get there, introduce yourself, tell them why you're there. And the reason why you're there is because you're a drug addict and an alcoholic. Just let everybody know. When you're done with that meeting, come down to this Chinatown gym and I'm going to teach you how to be a man in the ring. And I'm going to train with you for 2 hours. And if I'm not there to train, you still come and train. Once you're done training, you're going to have lunch, and that lunch is going to be chicken and broccoli. And then you're going to take a nap, and then you're going to go to work, and then you're going to have chicken and broccoli again, and you're going to go to bed as early as possible. And right before you hit your bed, you're going to drop down on your knees and say thank you. And he was like, that's it. That's your life right now. And it might sound boring and crazy hearing that. Like it might sound completely impossible for you to potentially commit to something like that. But if you do, and I know you can, your chance of living an awesome life are great. And I believe them. And that's what I started doing.
How long do you do that for?
Today.
All the way through till today?
Today. That's what I do. That's my plan. You know, my morning routine is definitely enhanced and I've added a lot of shit to it over the years. I believe that a morning routine is arguably one of the most powerful things any human being can commit to. You know, we start our day every single day with an opportunity to win, right? And the difference between getting out of bed or hitting snooze is fucking massive. Massive. It's huge. Huge. The difference between waking up at 5:15 in the morning and 9:15 in the morning, huge. Huge. You cannot buy time. It is not available for money. So you have to sacrifice for it or earn it. And for me, waking up at 5:15 in the morning is a sacrifice and I'm earning those hours, right? Like adding hours to the backside of my day are unproductive hours. Like what great happens after 10 o'clock at night, realistically?
Nothing. I put up a post last night on Facebook about talking about how when I was younger, even just a couple of years ago, I thought it was cool to stay up late, get very little sleep, grind, do whatever and not prioritize sleep. Now I try to be in bed 9 o'clock, 9:30. I'm waking up as early as I am now. Like when I was working at Whole Foods back in the day, I'd get up at 4:35. Now I'm getting up at like 6 and I'm disciplined where you got to go to the gym. You got to get your workout in. I go for a walk with a weighted vest now, 20 pounds with my dog, 2-mile walk in the cold, rain or snow. And I'm in a good routine. I don't do any business until I'm done with everything. And then I'm setting my interviews for like 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. So I do this whole routine before I even start the day, and I'm just feeling so much better. It
is anybody listening here, like you don't have to go do a whole long list of crazy things like I do, although maybe you eventually would want to, because the things that I do in the morning now set me up for I'm like bulletproof, honestly. But even just getting up, one little hack that I've shared a lot is, you don't have to set an alarm to wake up in the morning if you set an alarm to go to bed. So if you have an alarm in your phone, for you it would be 9:30. That's your go to bed alarm. When that alarm goes off, if you commit to going to bed at that time, you don't need an alarm to wake up in the morning because you are naturally going to wake up early in the morning. I believe rising before the sun is I don't think that there's anything more powerful than those early morning hours. And the only way to achieve those successfully is to go to bed early, right? And for me, it's 9:30 every night. And I don't have to have the alarm anymore because it's just my routine. But going to bed at 9:30 and waking up between 5 and 5:30 is a game changer because A, you're up before most people. B, it's uninterrupted, complete control time. Like you don't have to worry about other people in your life. My wife and kids don't wake up until 6:37. So I get a full hour and change every single morning to do whatever it is I want to do. And it all is selfish and self-indulgent and typically self-care actions, it used to just be straight to the gym. But now I do all sorts of things that I don't, because I'm an entrepreneur, I can make my own schedule. So I'll work out at 4:00 now and maybe I'll get some fasted cardio in, but I'm definitely doing meditation in the morning. I'm definitely doing red light therapy and breath work. I'm definitely doing some sauna and cold plunging. I'm doing these things that people will roll their eyes at now. They're like, oh, you're one of those guys. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I am. Guess what? By 7:00 in the morning, it doesn't matter what gets thrown my way. I handle it well because I take absolutely good care. I take very good care of myself and I show up as a father better. I show up as a husband better. I show up as a son and a brother better. And certainly as a business owner better. I sacrifice those hours, that sleep time to just be a better human, and that all started when Marcus gave me that plan, straight up,
How hard was it to work in the restaurant industry while sober? I'm sure that's very relatable to a lot of people.
It's interesting. Somebody asked me that the other day. I was done, man. I was just done. Frank didn't make me clean the restaurant. He actually gave me my job back pretty quickly, because he saw that I was committed. I dove deep into this thing. I wanted to get sober. And I just had that moment of grace, man. It's hard to describe that. It was it doesn't come around often for addicts to get that, that moment of grace where you let people help you, where you feel like you can actually change. But it was the right, it was perfect timing for whatever reason. I can't describe it. But I went right back to the restaurant and I worked behind the bar, early sobriety. I worked in a restaurant as a technician, as an employee from 23 in sobriety all the way till I was 28 when I opened up my first business. And I didn't have any desire. It's weird. I was done, I did not obsess over drinking and using drugs. So, sometimes it's, and that's why I make myself available for people that are struggling. I raise money every single year through Creatures of Habit to pay for people's treatment. So we do a ruck. You said you go out with a weight vest. We do a ruck every year. It's called We'll Wear the Weight. And I get 100 people to join me on this ruck where last year we rucked around Central Park. The year before that, we rucked all of the bridges that connect Manhattan to Brooklyn. And, we raise a bunch of cash and we partner with a foundation called the Release Recovery Foundation. And we get really great discounts on treatment facilities across the country. And I just post on social media, if you're struggling with addiction right now and you're ready for help, I will pay for your full journey. soup to nuts. I'll fly you to the facility. I'll pay for your time there. I'll pay for your for your aftercare, everything. You just tell me you're ready. Like I make myself available. And I do that because it was given to me free. It was, that dude Marcus didn't have to spend time with me. This other guy, Gavin, who was there, didn't have to do that for me. But these dudes saw this person, not an addict. They saw a person that was dying and wanted desperately, but didn't know how to get help. And so last year we put 5 people through treatment. 4 of them are still sober. I speak to all of them. Their lives are saved, man. It's crazy to think that, right? Like I personally was involved in really helping someone see that there's availability for sobriety. And I see it in AA, I'm not even supposed to say AA, but I see it in the rooms of recovery a lot, the 12 steps, right? Like I see it all the time, But to be able to say, hey, like, I'm going to hold your hand through this. I'm not going to fucking chase you. I'm not going to force you. You have to want it. But if you want it, I'm here for you, And that's what has been like one of the most gratifying parts of not only Creatures of Habit as my company, but just like being a sober dude,
Share with us that transition from, working for someone else to building your own companies to where you're at now with that.
Well, so Frank, about 2 years after I got sober, I asked Frank if he would sit down with me. I wanted to tell him I was ready to open up my own business. And, I'm like 25, 26. But I had been working in restaurants since I was 12. So I'd worked every position, front of house, back of house. I really understood the restaurant business. And when I got sober, like I really did kick it into 6th gear. Like I became pretty responsible and in the best shape of my life. Like my life changed fast. Like within 6 months, I was a totally different person. Like I was literally in a fist fight 2 to 3 days a week before I got sober. Like I was not the guy you wanted to hang out with because at any moment I was going to fly off the handle. I have not been in a single fist fight since I got sober outside of a controlled environment. And my life just changed very quickly, And so I really did feel in my bones that I had what it took to be a business owner. So I asked Frank if he would sit with me, and I was like, dude, I think I'm ready to do this. And he looked at me and he was like, no, you're not. I don't know if you'll ever be ready, Mikey. I don't know if you have it in you. And it just crushed me, dude. Crushed me. Like this guy that like I really wanted to emulate because he's got such a great thing going. And he was like, I don't think you have it in you. And I was like kind of crushed and mortified. But as I was leaving that meeting, he was like, but if you really want to take it seriously, you should go to culinary school. And I was like, that night, online, enrolled in French culinary for the next entry, and went to culinary school. And while I was at French culinary, Cornell and FCI had collaborated on a restaurant management program. Cornell is like the greatest hospitality program in the country, arguably the world. And so a lot of professors from Cornell came down to FCI and they put this like 3-day-a-week restaurant management program together that overlapped with my culinary arts thing. So I applied for a scholarship for that. I got the scholarship and I did that. And when I graduated, I was like, there was no doubt in my mind that I was going to open up a business. I was like, I kind of had a fearless mindset towards it. I was like, I'm just going to start. And so I started writing a plan. I didn't know what the business was going to be necessarily, but I knew exactly where I wanted it to be. I knew the kind of vibe. I knew the kind of food that I wanted to do there. And I just started writing it. And my childhood best friend, Dan Holzman, he got me my job. He got me my first job in a restaurant. He's a little older than me. He's a couple years older than me. And he got me a job there as a delivery boy. He went into the kitchen like when we both worked in restaurants through high school, he gravitated towards the kitchen, I gravitated towards the front of the house. And we worked in a couple of the same restaurants together, and we always said, like, one day we'll open up a restaurant together. But like, I got deep into the drug world, he didn't, right? So when I kind of surfaced, I like tapped him, and he was the only friend really that stuck by me from the not tough guy crew. And I was like, dude, we're going to do this. I promise you. I don't know when, but it's going to happen. When I graduated culinary school, I called up Dan. He was living out in San Francisco, working at all these fancy restaurants. And I was like, dude, come home. It's time. I'm telling you, just come home. We're going to do it. Like, I'm going to fucking do this shit, and I need you to do this with me. And it took me a year of convincing to get him back, but ultimately I got him back. And I came up with this idea for a restaurant concept called the Meatball Shop, which is, I'd worked at this Italian restaurant for 8 years, and there was a dish on the menu called the rigatoni ragu. Everybody ordered the rigatoni ragu. It didn't matter what else you had on the menu. There was always a rigatoni ragu in the center of the table. It was like a famous dish in the restaurant. Everybody loved it. It was a $13 bowl of pasta. Rigatoni pasta with meatballs and sausage. Fucking amazing and delicious. The best red sauce you've ever had in your life. Literally, people would like, this little restaurant had an amazing wine list. People would come in, they would order a $13 bowl of pasta and a $1,000 bottle of red wine and sit at the bar with me. It was nuts. So I was like, there's something about this pasta, this bowl of pasta, this meatballs and rigatoni. So I always used to order late night for my meal 2 to 3 nights a week, a bowl of meatballs and sausage and tomato sauce with a side of broccoli and a side of spinach. I was like sans rigatoni. I wasn't really eating pasta then, right? And people would be like, well, what are you eating? I'd be like, oh, I'm just having a bowl of meatballs, They'd be like, oh man, that looks good. I would dip the broccoli in the sauce. And then one day I was like, this is the business. This is it. I can make meatballs out of anything. Chicken, pork, beef, lamb, venison, like anything. Meatball, veggies. Like I can make tons. People love meatballs. And so I came up with this idea called the Meatball Shop, where we'd make 5 different kinds of meatballs. You choose your meatballs, you choose what kind of sauce you want, and then you choose your sides. And we had 6 starchy sides: rigatoni, spaghetti, polenta, risotto, mashed potatoes, and then there'd always be a special. And then we had 6 veggie sides, a couple of different salads. You can put your meatballs on top of it. You can put your meatballs on the side. It was a full choose your own adventure experience, right? And we had a menu that you just check it off. Say, I want my chicken meatballs with pesto on a bowl of spaghetti and a side of mashed potatoes. Like, it was just like an awesome experience. People loved it. And you'd walk into the restaurant, and it was this old school New York vibe, like kind of like old schooly Italian restaurant, but with like a little flair. And there'd always be Biggie Smalls, Nas, whatever playing in there, because I grew up in the 90s and that was my music. So we would come to this restaurant, and so I got Dan back. We put this thing together. 14 regulars from Frank Restaurant wrote me a check to start the business. So we raised money from the regulars at that restaurant, and we opened it, and it took off like wildfire. Like, we projected doing about $1 million in our first year, and we did 4 million.
Wow.
We were cooking meatballs live on Jay Leno, Jimmy Fallon, Chelsea Handler, Good Morning America, The Today's Show, every single news broadcast you can imagine. It was insane. And it was a phenomenon. And one of the initial investors was like, you guys hit gold. Like, I want to scale this thing. Now, mind you asked the question, what was it like transitioning from being a restaurant technician to a restaurant owner? I had no idea what I was doing. Zero. But again, I just put the right foot in front of the left, asked for as much help as possible, continued. At that point, I was like insane fitness guy. So my foundation for everything in my life, but then for sure, was my commitment to fitness, because I believe that fitness and sticking to my nutrition kept me from having the need to want to derail with all the stress, right? And escape in other ways. I escaped in my fitness. I escaped in my commitment to nutrition, and my body was like, I was like in the best shape of my life, right? And so I stuck with that, and we scaled that restaurant concept to 6 units. I sold a bunch of equity in 2014, and that was life-changing experience for me, because I, never had money. So I, like that, I mean, a big check. And that gave me some freedom. That gave me an opportunity to start my next business without needing anyone, And so I knew that I wanted to open up another restaurant concept. So I took a corner on Broome and Mulberry Street, right at the heart of Little Italy. And people were like, "You're opening up a seafood restaurant like across the street from, the mouth of Little Italy. Like people go down there for Italian food." I was like, "Yeah, but I'm gonna be different. I want to be like a, an option there." Right? It's hard to open up a restaurant in New York City and be different. But if you open up a seafood restaurant in the middle of Little Italy, you're going to stand out. You'll be the only seafood restaurant with a vibe in Little Italy. And so I was kind of like the first guy to do something like that. Now Mulberry Street is covered with cool restaurants. All the there's a bunch of cool shit on Mulberry Street now, and I kind of started it on Broome Street. So I opened up that business, and the same exact thing happened, man. We were #1 restaurant in New York Magazine for almost 9 months straight. And I ended up taking on a partner, raising some cash, and scaled that to 6 units. And so at this point now I had 12 restaurants in the city, and I had a pop-up in the Hampton, in Montauk in the summer.
Oh, wow.
And it was nuts, like I got very good at business, but I didn't go to college, dude. I learned how to do that stuff purely on emotional intelligence and like believing in myself and in my gut. And then I think another component, which I think is important to articulate, is, you can, there's really like 2 kinds of people when it comes to trust, right? You can meet somebody and get a good feeling from them when it comes to business, and then give them 100% of your trust out the gate. It's their job to keep it. There's other people that meet someone, even if they get a good feeling from them, and they make them earn their trust out the gate. I give you my trust out the gate. And I think that makes for a really comfortable work environment, right? Like I'm not like constantly looking at you sideways, expecting you to like earn my trust. You already have it. It's your job to keep it. You fuck up, ding 10%. You fuck up again, ding 20%. You fuck up again, it always doubles. You ding 40%, you've lost 40% of my trust, it's over. And that happens kind of fast if someone's going to do that. But you get my trust 100% out the gate. And I think that gave me an opportunity to have, at that point, there was 700 employees. It's a lot of people. I had to get comfortable with trusting people. So yeah, dude, it was nuts.
That's incredible.
It was nuts, And then I sold a bunch of equity at Seymour's right before the pandemic and created Creatures of Habit, which is my company now.
I got to try Seymour's. I know you don't really own it, right? Anymore.
I own about 9% of it.
Is it worth going? Should we check it out?
It is, 100%.
For our Connecticut listeners?
Yeah, dude, you should, 100%.
It's in Darien, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that's near here. That's like 35 minutes.
Yeah, so they opened up, I left Seymour's day to day and sold a bunch of my equity in 2019. Darien and Arlington opened up over the last 3 years. So, they're newer restaurants, but Seymour's is great. Underutilized, fun. It's a sustainable seafood restaurant. So
good crab cake?
No crab cake,
what?
actually.
How do you not have crab cake on the menu?
It's seasonal. I think the crab cake will come in seasonally, but you gotta go there and try the menu. The menu's bomb.
You guys have like a nice outdoor area there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Well, for the summer.
How far is it from here?
35 minutes.
Yeah, you should go. You'd like it.
I'm going to go. I don't go to Darien too much. I go to Westport a lot for dinner. Mm-hmm. Westport, South Norwalk.
I had a restaurant in Westport for a minute.
What was it called?
Meatball Shop. We did a pop-up.
They were in Westport?
Yeah, we did a pop-up there for like a year, and it ended up not working out. We were directly across from What's that taco spot?
Oh, yeah, Bar Taco.
Bar Taco. They crush it.
Really? They no, I know like they crush it, but they beat you out or?
Oh yeah, dude. That concept, that for whatever reason, Meatball Shop did not work there. I wasn't with Meatball Shop when they opened it, but Meatball Shop like did not succeed, not nearly as well as Bar Taco did. I think Bar Taco is just more of like
it's a vibe.
It's a vibe.
The drink.
Yeah,
it's like
it's a
tequila
drink vibe.
Escape right down the road and stuff.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the biggest learning lesson, from your story?
I think at the end of the day, it boils down to we actually can do anything we put our mind to. Actually, like I'm a real true example of that. And the only person standing in our way from us and our dreams is us. Developing a positive relationship with myself was really, really hard to do after the years of destruction. I mean, it really, and I still battle with it. That negative self-talk still kind of, whispers in my ear. It doesn't scream like it used to, but it still is there. I really do think that the idea, the message that I try to put out there is anyone can change at any time. It all depends on how bad you want it. And that's like anything in life. Like, how bad do you really want it? How bad do you want it? You can, if I'm sitting here across from you, I'm 44 years old, and I said to you, you know what, Ian? I want to be a surgeon. At 44 years old, I'm going to start the journey. And I commit to it. It's a 15-year journey, right? I have to go back to college, go to med school, residency, 15 years. So 54, 59, I could be doing surgery. If I really wanted to do it, it's totally possible. Why not? Why not? There are a lot of people that don't feel they can change. And where I think the problem resides is they're thinking about changing the past. You can't fucking change the past. No one's ever been able to do that. So stop putting all of your energy and your brain power towards what happened in the past and what could potentially happen in the future, and think about what the fuck is in front of you right this moment, right now. And I've literally trained myself to think that way. The past is history and the future is mystery. It's the truth. If you're not focused on what's going on in front of you right now, it's going to pass you by. Everything happens in life now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, right now. And so you have the ability to harness that shit. I'm not saying you need to meditate and do red light therapy and breath work and fucking work out like a savage, although it would probably be great for you. But understanding that every single day is an opportunity to win. You have the power. You have the control, especially if you start early in the morning. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it's my story, man. I went from overdosing on heroin and doing everything in my power to get over on everyone around me if I could, to people throwing millions of dollars in my path to build with, straight up.
Very inspirational.
Thanks, man.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today, Michael. I appreciate you DMing me, man. It's been a pleasure to have this incredible conversation.
Thanks for having me.
And I think it'll be really inspiring to our listeners. Not everyone that's in your shoes success-wise shares their stories about the past like you have. And I think that kind of in your world too. There's very few that do that. Hopefully more people in the world start to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is why I've been able to build a community, because I think the authenticity of our story is what people resonate with. I think the business of business is storytelling. It's your business, actually.
Yeah.
But like, I've always thought about business as like, if people don't actually feel something when they interact with the business, and ideally feel like the story that we're trying to tell, it's never going to work. So I always think about storytelling in business, and I built this personal brand on my story. So everybody check out Creatures of Habit. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and your podcast too. We'll have it linked in the bio with your product, and to our listeners, hopefully we'll hear some promo soon about these with an exclusive discount.
Yeah,
link.
we got you 100%.
Yeah, that's going to be cool. And you just add water to this? Or
Yeah, so basically the way you make it is you just grab a jar, pour 5 ounces of almond milk, oat milk, regular milk, or water, but it's better with milk, into the jar, pour in the pouch, mix it for 30 seconds, cover it up, throw it in the fridge overnight, pull it out in the morning, and it's ready to rock. I always loosen it up with like a little extra splash of milk. But
only 5 ounces, huh?
Yeah, 5 ounces of liquid.
Wow. I'm excited to try this tomorrow.
I'm excited for you.
You said the peanut butter one first, right?
Peanut butter banana is definitely my fave.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will be posting about this regularly.
Sick. Awesome.
Well, thanks again, brother. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, man.